Welcome to Exceptional TV. My name is Karen Judd Smith, and today I'm here with Patrick Erlandson. Now, I'm honored and delighted to have Patrick here to talk with us, and yet I'm not completely delighted. Our topic is human trafficking, a crime that forcefully exploits women, men, children, and according to the United Nations, human trafficking affects every country in the world, and it's not talked about enough. So we're here today to talk about it. Now, I want you to know, and you're going to hear about this, that Patrick is doing far more than just plain talking about it. And so that's what we're going to look at and hear about what he is doing today. We'll look closer at this dark underbelly of humanity and take the time to hear about what Patrick and his team are doing as they dare to step in and disrupt, yes, our lives by bringing such an ugly topic to our attention, but so that we can pay it forward at least a little and disrupt the lives of those who are decimating so many other people. So, Patrick, before I put you on the spot, I'm going to go over just a few statistics that may be shocking, I don't know, but let me just dive into some of them. So this just comes from the DoSomething.org site. And I probably should be quoting from your site, but I'm going to let you do that when we get to it. So human trafficking involves transporting somebody into a situation out of exploitation. They usually exploit the vulnerable, those who either think they're going to go to a better life, who are going to get a job, who are getting away out of an already difficult situation. And often it's realistically, it's a modern form of slavery. And it's one that the UN and countries around the world recognize that we just have very few real statistics about. So they estimate that there are about 20 to 40 million people in modern slavery today. And the full scope of human trafficking is really difficult because so many cases go undetected. It could be the person working in the house next door to you. Sadly, there is so much human trafficking that is going on in America and in my country, original country of Australia, and every other Western and supposedly developed country, and the Eastern and areas as well as in Africa. So it's just a horrendous number of lives. Now, globally, there are 71% of enslaved people are said to be women and girls, while men and boys account for 29%. They say that about 50,000 are trafficked each year into the United States, and most often from Mexico and the Philippines. Now, half of the criminal trafficking cases that are active in the US were sex trafficking cases involving children. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all the statistics. Instead, I'm going to make myself better again, and I'm going to say, welcome to Patrick. Patrick, we're so honored to have you here. And I really want to hear your story. We can begin there, and we'll get to what you're doing. Absolutely, we'll get to what you're doing and the importance of that and where it's going to be taking place and when and all of those sorts of details. But first of all, I want to ask you, how did you get to this? So don't get there straight away. Tell us a little bit about you and your journey to getting this, because I'm sure you didn't wake up as a 5-year-old saying, Mommy, I want to deal with sexual exploitation and human trafficking. I mean, it just wasn't what you would normally plan on doing with your life. So tell us your story.
Any more than a girl at the age of 5 wants to be exploited and prostituted and those kind of things. It's true. It is something that it's an evolutionary process of life. And Karen, I'm so grateful to be here. And it's always one of those things where I kind of like, I'm so grateful and I'm also sorry the bearer of disturbing news. But for me, it's like, it's only disturbing if we're not doing anything to stop it. It's something, it's really dark and ugly if we're just kind of like allowing it to continue and not really facing it and not really doing something to end it. And so that's where I want to liberate people from just feeling it's dark and to feel empowered. We can actually change this. Huge difference in this issue. I think for me, my course of life has been interesting. I lived in Japan for 8 years during the 90s. So during the 90s, I was living in Japan. I'm an English teacher. By profession, I teach English as a second language. I've been doing that for probably 30 years.
So you can speak English quite well then.
You'd think, it's kind of it gets interspersed with Japanese expressions now, but but living in Japan was interesting, and I've had the experience. I've been able to go to Zambia. My wife has worked in Africa. She went 4 or 5 times working in kind of medical missions in Saharan Africa, in Niger. I've been just through a process of always being engaged in some form or other with compassion and looking at what people are suffering through and trying to make a difference there. Together we opened a thrift store that was for funding projects with kids in Africa. And so I took a group over from Los Angeles to Zambia, which was a real eye-opening experience at a time when Zambia had 80% unemployment, and kids were flocking into the capital city, wanting electricity and the internet, and then just having to survive in these massive camps of teenagers with no adult supervision, AIDS running rampant. So those things kind of really unlocked my heart to what was happening kind of internationally. I went back to teaching, and then around 2009, the United Nations opened an office for UNHCR in Los Angeles. There was such an explosion of refugees worldwide with what was happening in Darfur and in Sudan, Somalia, as well as across Europe. So you had this expansion of refugee population with very little awareness and engagement in the United States. So I quit my job teaching and went to go work with the UN office here in LA. And that's when I first got a hint and got first exposed to human trafficking. And it's not in kind of the typical labor or sex trafficking. The story that kind of slammed into my heart was we were learning of children escaping from Darfur, from southern Sudan, hearing that they could get jobs in Egypt. Yeah. So they're fleeing from, in many cases, seeing their parents killed or being sent away by their parents to try to keep their kids safe. And they're traveling through Egypt to try to get to Israel. And there was a group of Bedouins in Egypt. They would find these refugees when they were crossing through the desert, crossing through Egypt. They would welcome them in, feed them, welcome them. All the while, they'd call for a doctor to come down from Cairo. The doctor would show up, they'd drug everyone, and then cut out their organs and bury them in the desert. Yeah. And that story just kind of, the betrayal of a child's trust, and especially you're coming from a horror, and finally someone gives you some glimmer of humanity, and then to betray you that way. Yeah. I just couldn't let it go. And I started attending everything I could, researching everything I could find. And then just discovering how prevalent trafficking is in the United States, which...
Well, that's the shocking thing is it's in almost every community. It follows many of the trucking lines. I mean, there are just so many things that just are shocking to the average person. Most people don't hear. So, yeah, tell us a bit more about how prevalent it is and what you've learned about what's going on in America.
Yeah, the big challenge in working in this space is that for most people, it's an over there problem and it's a those people problem. Right. And that's the handicap that you're working against. There were certain stories that really kind of hit my heart. I mean, one of the first people that I met as a survivor, her story, just like really opened my eyes to the reality for an awful lot of children in America. And in her case, her mother was divorced, had a boyfriend. She was, I believe, around 12 at the time. She was playing with her dolls on her bed in her bedroom. The mother's boyfriend came into her room and sat down on the bed next to her and put his hand on her leg and made it clear kind of what his intentions were. The door was still open. And so this little girl was sitting there with this person that, is supposed to be a father figure to her. The mother comes in. The mother comes into the door, looks and sees what's happening, turns around, goes out and closes the door and allows her boyfriend to rape the daughter. and she runs away from home, and in no time at all, she's in the hands of traffickers and being sold on the streets. And the thing that I've been finding, I was talking to a survivor last year, and I mean, two things. She was telling me that she now works in rescuing girls who are on the streets. I mean, they go out and interact with the people that are being exploited and victims. And she said that all these victims were out on the streets in massive numbers and working these crazy hours, 18 hours a day, not being allowed to sleep. And I said, why suddenly this extreme conditions? And she said, because it's almost Christmas and the trafficker wants to buy presents for his kids. And so you have this, putting a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old out on the streets to be sold over and over and over, regardless of whether she's on her period or not, regardless of whether she's sick or not. It's just horrifying to me. And this is a dehumanization of people who should be celebrating all the possibilities and opportunities and dreams of life. And that just kind of hit me, was just how, the vulnerability that we're creating. And I think it's a big problem in America. Other countries, it's different. I've been to Cambodia and different places where human trafficking has a slightly different face.
Right.
But in America, we've created a tremendous amount of vulnerability in our children. We're busy. We're disengaged parents. We're not attentive. We in many cases, we don't really know much about our own children. Because when we come home from work, we're tired. And that's the thing that I've learned over the years. I mean, we have children today that'll trust a stranger they've met on Instagram more than their own parents. And that's what's leading to, just an explosion of exploitation. And I think the figures, you talk about 50,000 being brought into the United States. I've heard it's closer to 17 to 20,000 that are actually being brought into the United States. But it's between 100 and 300,000 Americans who are being exploited. And we have almost half a million missing children a year.
So when you say Americans being exploited, can you break that down? Step away from just the pure numbers, and so that means a child on the street, a runaway, is then sent out is pimped out. Are people taken into, what? I don't really want to ask you the specifics, but I do want to ask you the specifics, if you know what I mean.
Well, you had mentioned about data and figures, and one of the reasons why this is so complex is that a large number of cases in America are not like the movie Taken, where girls are being dragged out from under the bed and sold in some auction. Those things do happen, but I mean,
they're very few.
The vast majority of cases are someone taking the time, using game apps, using Instagram, using social media. They're finding a child who's willing to talk. They're building a relationship.
Right.
They'll invest months and months of developing a trusting relationship with a child, to where that child then will do what they ask. And once they meet, if they arrange them a meeting, then it can go several ways. I know one case in Orange County where this was, as a parent, this was really sad, because this was a teenage girl who was really being disruptive of her family. She was causing problems for her younger siblings. The parents said, okay, why don't you just go live with a friend, go stay with one of your friends, come back when you're ready to be part of our family again. And this was a girl who was 16. She didn't go to one of her friends' house. The parents knew the parents of her friends. She had met a guy on Instagram and decided to go stay with him. And as soon as she met with him, he shot her with heroin, and he basically sold her repeatedly for a couple of months of just he had just men coming every day. He just kept shooting her up with drugs until she was just hopelessly addicted. She finally escaped when he had negotiated a sale. He was selling her for $20,000 to another trafficker, and she ended up escaping. But instead of going home, she was so ashamed and so addicted to drugs at this point that she found another pimp to work for on the streets within miles of her own home. And her parents, they know that she's out there, but they're afraid to do anything that's going to cause her to run away and then have her disappear from their lives forever. And just the agony. I mean, I sat down with these parents, and you talk to the parents, and it's just miserable. But so that's a case where drugs were involved in order to keep this person under control. The other case is emotional.
Let me ask you there. When you say that people take the time to really lure these people in, so why is it worth it to them to take all that time to invest in these people?
Well, if I can sell you 10 to 15 to 20 times a day to different customers, so however much that is, $25, $50, $100 a pop, you're bringing in $1,000 a day, and if I don't give you any days off, I mean, it's like $250,000 you can make from selling one girl. It's extremely profitable, and the chances of incarceration, the chances of something really seriously happening to a trafficker are pretty slim.
So the odds, it's a low risk business to them.
It's getting higher. I mean, California increased the penalties for trafficking, but trafficking a child is not a violent crime. So you're going to get released from prison after serving a minimum of your sentence. And these guys know it. And traffickers are running girls from inside the prison. I've heard of so many cases of a trafficker being locked up, and he's still running his business. He's still making money and controlling the girls. And I think this is always the question: why don't the girls just run away? They're out on the street, just run away. But they don't understand. It's like Stockholm syndrome on steroids. This person has taken over the center of a young person's life. He's the father, the uncle, the boyfriend, the grandfather, the brother, the lover. He's occupied all of the positions that someone would normally have filled by 20 or 30 people.
Plus, I would imagine that there's this enormous barrier that the individual builds around themselves, and you mentioned it before, of shame and in just how do you go back to your parents? How can I stand in front? How can I was the one who ran away, and then I was the one who was so stupid, and then I can't go back to the people that I love. Well,
and a lot of it, these guys are really clever, and then they it's just like child sex abuse, or like an incestuous abuse, where a father or brother is misusing his sister or daughter, and then he turns it on them, like you did that. Right. You wore the panties into the room, so it's on you. It's your fault. Or domestic violence, where it's like, look what you've made me do. That's exactly how these guys work. They set it up so you start to have a fantasy. You build a fantasy over what this means. This guy loves me. He cares about me more than my parents. This guy is the one who he knows me because he's been talking to me for months, and he knows my secrets. He knows my hopes and dreams. This is the guy I can trust. And so you start, the person, the victim, is actually creating the fantasy that they're buying into.
Right.
And then it's like, then for them to come back and say, yeah, I'm the one who did this, not too much. That's too much for them to admit, even to themselves.
Right.
So then you have these girls defending their trafficker. Like he can torture them. He can abuse them in ways that we can't even imagine. And she'll go back and defend him. And that this is because it's her fantasy and she's not willing to give it up.
Right.
And this is a challenge for parents.
And then I understand that many times those who have been trafficked, even if they are no longer trafficked, they will oftentimes become the madams. They will work to traffic others.
Well, and this is the complexity for law enforcement. So within the structure, you have a certain language. Excuse my language, but the bottom bitch is the girl who rises in seniority, and it usually has a more stable relationship with the trafficker. And in many cases, they'll put the property, they'll put their cars and stuff like that in this girl's name. So they're insulated, they're protected from law enforcement going after them and from illegal repercussions. So the bottom bitch is that kind of the choice position where you're going to have to work a little bit less than the other girls. You're going to do the training of the other girls, and you may even have children with the trafficker, which gives him more leverage.
There's another layer of complexity, and
right. Wow. So this all adds to it. Like, people want these hard, fast numbers, And when you have a girl who feels like this is her boyfriend who's trafficking her, or in one case, I was just listening to a friend of mine last night talk about her husband was her trafficker. He just sucked her into this and ended up selling her to other men. And so how do you define that? And how do you get a 13-year-old to define what's happening to her when she, in her mind, this is her boyfriend? And yeah, he's doing these things to her, but you know, it's like that famous quote that's attributed to Harriet Tubman. You know, it's like I rescued so many slaves, and I could have rescued 1,000 more if they only knew that they were slaves. And that's the mindset. It's like they did not recognize themselves as being victims because they bought into it as their fantasy.
Right.
Yeah. So for parents, I mean, I think this is the nightmare for parents today is realizing that you really do not know who your children are talking to online, and they're establishing relationships. Even if if you ask a kid, do you add strangers to your Instagram? I mean, 90% of the kids will say no, never. And yet, because in their mind, a stranger is not this person who says, "Oh, I go to the same school as you," and I saw you today in the hall.
Right.
Not a stranger.
But I've seen your avatar before. I know who you are. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Use the same language as me. We're not strangers. Yeah. There was a guy in Texas that they ended up catching. He was running like 20 to 30 girls. I mean, he would sit there all day long and chat with different girls as if he was a 16-year-old boy. And here's this guy who's like, I think he was in his 40s. And he's building these relationships with all these kids and just getting to the point where they're so acclimated to him.
Right.
It's a small step.
So social media, this whole internet thing has just been a boon to this industry, right?
In more ways than one. You have, with the internet, I mean, one of the first things that really people saw the opportunity for once the internet exploded was pornography.
Right.
And I mean, I started bringing this up 5-6 years ago, and I know I wasn't anywhere near the beginning, but people started making the link between human trafficking and pornography.
Right.
And there was absolute resistance. I was organizing conferences for community awareness of human trafficking, and I wanted to bring in someone to speak about pornography. And the team of people I was working with was like, no, that's a whole other issue. That's a whole other thing. Don't touch it. But the reality is, pornography is what's really kind of taken this to a whole other level. I always use this analogy of, remember the MGM shooter in Las Vegas?
Right.
And all these people attending a concert down in the parking lot, and this guy's up above. But he takes a regular gun, he puts a bump stock on it, and it turns into a machine gun. And then you're just sitting there with a parking lot full of vulnerable people, and you just randomly start shooting into a crowd. So what's happened with pornography is you've gone from Playboy magazine and Hustler to massive video content of actual rapes of 5 men on one girl. And it's out there for free for anyone. So in a moment of vulnerability, in a moment of weakness, you turn for comfort, or you turn for stimulation, or you turn for something, to break up the monotony of your life, and bam, you're hit with, a machine gun blast. It's no longer looking at some cute breast. It's now something much more extreme that impacts the brain like a Mack truck. And the thing that's so frightening of this is we now have 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 10-years are having their first exposure to hardcore pornography, which is then shaping how they look at women. Pornhub, I was going through all of Pornhub's data. They're so proud of how much bandwidth they take up in the universe, putting out thousands and thousands of videos a day through Pornhub. And 3 of the top 10 searches in the last year I checked were incestuous.
Right.
Sex with my mother, sex with my stepmom, sex with my sister. I mean, so you put yourself in the mindset. This is not like an adult who has some degree of management, keeping things in perspective. But this is a 9-year-old who's now looking at somebody having sex with his mother, and the mother's enjoying it. What does that do to a child's brain? And then on the flip side, you have who's performing with 4 or 5 men doing horrible things to your body. This isn't someone who can't say no. So I mean, my message to men, and this is my area really. I want to get more men involved in this and more men to recognize that even peripherally we're contributing to human trafficking, and that every time you click to watch something in porn, you're sending a message to porn producers. Okay, we need more of that. We need more content. And as you look at more extreme things, which you inevitably do because of the way the brain works, you're going to have someone perform that stuff who can't say no, and that's going to be a trafficking victim.
And I mean, some of the people that I happen to know dealing with cybercrime, dark web, I don't want to even say, I don't even want to say what I know is being sold out there. And I'm sure everybody, can find out for themselves. But I mean, it just sickens, quite literally, sickens me. The ages that are being dealt with, and I mean, people just want to watch somebody. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. It's just horrendous. I mean, it's just our humanity is I mean, sometimes at its worst. I mean, at our best, we are magnificent, and at our worst, we are just horrendous.
The worst. I mean, lower than animals. Yeah. And I think to me, the real hope is looking at brain science, which you can't avoid. I mean, we really want to understand what's happening within the brain. To me, the reassurance is that we're hardwired for a certain type of reality. And I think people talk about trauma, and we talk about now generations of trauma.
Right.
We're just beginning to scratch the surface of understanding of what trauma does to a person's life and the choices they make. Right? But to me, the message of trauma, the fact that we experience trauma, is that our brain is hardwired for a different type of reality. We're not meant to live in an environment where our fathers rape daughters, where we lie to each other, where we steal from each other, because the brain just kind of can't process that. And so it causes all kinds of things to suffer and influences us in really negative ways. But if that's true, if the brain is hardwired for a certain reality, then it's just up to us to get there. And I think as we make effort to really understand what's happening, and this is like, I've worked with groups of men, groups of young men who have pornography addiction and things, because it so feeds the human trafficking world. It increases the demand, it increases the appetite for things that a girlfriend or a wife are not going to do. Porn has all kinds of influences, but it's really interesting because the end result is it's self-harming. So you think you're getting some relief. You think you're getting some relief from stress. You think you're getting some kind of, you're self-medicating in some way by paying for sex or by watching porn. The estimates that I've seen are about 25 million men in America pay for sex. And that can be from one time to 4 or 5 times a week.
Right.
But 25 million, that's a lot of men who are out looking to pay for sex, thinking that that's going to give them what's going to actually make them happier in life. But you talk to these men who have had their lives destroyed, their marriages destroyed, the loss of their children, the loss of their own self-respect and their integrity. I mean, the cost is so high, and the glitter and shimmer of the artificial, it never lives up to the promise. It just never does.
In terms of those kinds of numbers of men, so you said how many in America a week are buying sex?
25 million is the figure that they have. This is the population that has bought or does buy sex.
Okay.
Pays for sex.
Are there any statistics on how many of those 25 million live with regret? And kind of wish they hadn't done it, or their lives really go to there's no information on that.
I've never seen that, and I think from my experience, I mean, as a man, there's a spectrum, and there are some men who just hate women, who just feel absolutely entitled to take what they want, to do whatever they want, absolutely psychopathic in their view of women and what they deserve. And then that filters all the way down to someone who has a tremendous amount of guilt just from looking at a girl in a miniskirt. I mean, so you have this whole spectrum of how men respond to kind of sexual stimulation attraction. And so I don't think there is I've never seen it anyway, a clear study on the numbers.
That kind of information would be perhaps useful. I mean, because part of it is people need to be aware at some level. That doesn't guarantee anything. Awareness never guarantees anything, but levels of awareness, of understanding that this kind of action doesn't result in the outcomes that you're expecting. I mean, it is important to have hard information on that kind of stuff. There's hard statistics on that, as well as just the sheer numbers of the problem.
That's a great idea, and I hope somebody's listening who is really into research and collecting.
On that, if somebody was really interested in research in this area, what would be some direction they could go in? Could they contact you? Would they, in terms of, because I know in the many young folk who are very digital natives and adept in programming and analytics and whatever else, many do want to help. Are there places where they can go to help with this kind of research? What are some of the things that young folk like that can do if they are, they've got some hours and they've got some time and they've got the heart for it?
Yeah, they can contact me. I can steer them in some directions. There are organizations like Thorn, which was actually originally started by Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher as DNA, and then it morphed into what's now called Thorn. But they work. They have hackers. They have people that are extremely tech savvy, and their thing is really disrupting, child pornography and human trafficking. And so, their thing is going after the person who's looking for this content, and theirs is not going deep. From what I understand, maybe they do, but they're going after the person who's doing a search for, underage girls, teens,
so that's driven by browser info and stuff like that. Right. They find ways to hack into that and probably track people around the web and all that sort of stuff.
They did a great, which was, if a guy is searching for something, then a pop-up will come on their screen showing their house. On a map, this is where you are right now. If you need help, please call this number.
That's a nice way of saying caught, exposed. We know where you are, and all of that information. And I know that large organizations, data intelligence organizations, also collate a lot of material and information, and from a lot of public sites. Even just whether it be Twitter feeds. There's a fire hose of data that can be drawn from the dark web about what's going on, and all kinds of information is dug from that. But still, in the end, I guess it comes around to finding ways, as kind of that program does, is to shaming the individual or exposing the individual who is looking for it. Or what are some of the methodologies for addressing this, not just disrupting the pipelines of trafficked people, but the market that is out there?
Well, there are people coming up with creative ways of doing that. Another one was the EPIC project, which was run out of Oregon, but started to be replicated across the country. But it was really built on Backpage. And since Backpage, all the heads of Backpage ended up being arrested, and that got shut down, all these other things have popped up since.
Right.
But what they were doing is they had a team of men who manned computers. They would use a blurry photograph of a girl who worked with them, post her picture on Backpage, she was for sale, kind of barely legal, all that kind of like code words that people use.
Right.
And they would immediately start getting men calling, to arrange a date with this girl. And then they would inform the person that, this person is underage. Do you realize that, the number of girls that are being trafficked? So they would have this script that they would read.
Right.
At the same time, they're collecting everybody's phone numbers.
Sure.
So the person knows that they're now vulnerable. And in many cases, it's like, whether you can believe men or not, but everyone does have the first time. So most guys will say, I've never done this before, and they're very apologetic.
Yeah.
But it's like, but once people do know that this is a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old who doesn't want to be here, this is someone who's being exploited by someone else. There are a lot of men whose conscience will then
Change,
take control. So you're going to get those people. But what they've done is if a person calls 2 or 3 times a week, then they submit all of that information to the police. And they brought down some people who are just serial buyers of minor children. So there are people doing various things. I had a phone call not too long ago with the head of the cyber crimes against children here in Los Angeles. And someone had called me and they had a case involving a 16-year-old. And so I called her to find out if she had any information or put it on her radar. And she goes, we are so, she said, 16 years old, she said, 16-year-old, they got to know better. And which was just shocking. And then she said, we have so many cases of 12, 11, 10, 9, 8-year-olds that we don't have the manpower to deal with anyone over 13 anymore. That it's just the quantity of younger and younger children who are being exploited. And that was just, she said, I'm sorry, I don't really mean to say it sounds so callous, but the reality is, they're kicking in doors like once, twice a week, they're kicking in doors of people who are producing child pornography or selling children. And it's just become such an extreme, problem that law enforcement can't keep up, legislators can't keep up with.
That's part of the problem is the massive increase. The enforcement issue is always the hardest part, and it's complex, and it's even just the doing of it. You've got to then train people to deal with those kinds of people. Then you've got to have a way for them to be, because you always end up dealing with the victims, and a whole part of the complexity about even our whole legal system is not really geared towards genuinely caring for victims, because so many times victims get re-traumatized if they have to be taken through the whole legal process. And so there are just problems that stack on top of problems with all of this. So let's get more positive. Okay. So what are you doing?
Thank you for asking. So when I first got involved, so this is almost 10 years ago when I started working with human trafficking, and I really looked at the spectrum. So you have the rescue side. I mean nobody likes the term, but actually enabling someone to leave and disengage and get free from what's called the life, which is closer to the death anyway. And then there's the whole restoration side, the restorative side of getting somebody back a life that was taken from them. And what attracted me is like, I just don't want to keep dealing with an open wound. We can prevent this. And so my whole focus shifted to prevention. So how do we, I mean, you're correct in that awareness doesn't necessitate change, but change doesn't start until there is
awareness. It's an essential first thing. It's essential but not sufficient. Yeah. Right.
It's not sufficient unto itself, because you get aware and you go home and have a beer and turn the TV on and forget about what you just learned.
Right.
But so that's where it's like action steps and having something that people can do. And this is, I just had someone on my program that she was a CEO of a company, retired. She heard about a human trafficking event with the San Bernardino Police Department. They were going to have a training. She was the only person who showed up at this training about human trafficking. I don't know, maybe 13 years ago, 12 years ago. Since then, she's written 2 books. She's worked in Cambodia and here. She works with law enforcement. She's trained, I think, around 300,000 people on issues of human trafficking and especially grooming. So it's like, you ignite one person and there's just a massive ripple effect. And I think that's where, to me, it's keep reaching out, keep letting people know what's happening in creative ways. So the 2 areas that I was really struck by and felt that these were the areas I wanted to focus on. And one was, obviously, our homes are producing vulnerable children. Right. Children who are susceptible to the promises of a liar and a thief. But also we're creating boys, especially boys, that have a sense of entitlement to another human being's body. And I keep going back to this because this really shocked me, and I'm pretty accustomed to this stuff. But I mean, we had an 11-year-old autistic child who was being sold by gang members in LA. An 11-year-old autistic child who probably had the mentality of a 6-year-old was being sold, and men were paying to have sex with this child. And that to me just kind of like, who are these guys? and realizing that these are our sons. These are coming out of our homes, right? These are young men, and sometimes our brothers, our uncles, whoever. And so what is creating that in the population? And I think again, a lot of it goes back to pornography and a very hyper pornified culture that's normalizing ways of looking at people. But so I started looking at fathers, and I think fathers are really the missing link. They're really essential to forming your very first views of male love, of what you should expect. You're observing. Children learn first from observing,
by watching. Yeah.
And how a husband treats his wife, how a father treats his children, is so critical in how they're going to feel about themselves and what they're going to expect from relationships in the future. And we have so many broken homes. And I met with this guy recently. He impressed me so much because he was divorced. He and his wife just couldn't stay together. But every time he goes to pick up the kids or go to visit his children, he brings flowers to his ex-wife. And he does that intentionally so his children see an example that there's of love between them, even if they can't stay together as husband and wife.
Because there are situations in life where it's even worse to stay, personalities, whatever it might be. Right. But yeah, the biggest thing I think is really to genuinely treat another human being with the dignity of a human being. It's
exactly
in that way. It's not rocket science, but it's at the human level. It's often very hard for people to do.
Yeah. So we need that kind of wake up call. And I think for fathers, I think fathers, and to a large extent, have kind of been marginalized. That they're not the essential caregiver. The mother's everything. So, and they kind of bought into that, and so long as they support the family, bring home the money, then that's enough. It's not enough. It's not enough in the development of our children, and we know that now. We've had 20, 30 years of research on the significance of fathers, and it's absolutely critical that a father or a healthy male figure is in the lives of children.
Right.
So this is part of my message. We really need to get fathers engaged and to realize. You as a dad, when you drop the ball, the consequences can be very serious. You could end up
in a
worse.
Other than giving voice to that yourself, what are the ways that you try to encourage fathers to understand their value in the family and understand the enormous silent contribution that is made by their presence and by the body language of how they treat other women, treat their wives, treat their own families. How do you do that? Because I do want to get round to what you're doing with the festival that's coming up that you have and the work that you are doing. So are there components of that? So tell us a little bit about how you're stepping out into the community and making your message very present and real in people's minds and hopefully then also in people's lives.
Yeah, I wish I could have gotten you that video. We did a video. So I've had 2 father conferences. So I've organized 2 events really specifically for fathers, and so we want to have that as an annual event, but also collaborating. There's so many other people who are dealing with fatherhood and fatherhood issues.
Right.
There's the Dad Project here in LA. This is a guy who's now training kids who grew up with no dad how to play with their child, how to deal with the most fundamental things because they didn't have a dad around. So they have no clue. Right. And now they're in a position of a father. There's so many great organizations, and the more we give voice to each other, the more that we collaborate, the more that people start to see more men taking this seriously, the more we normalize the message. And I think this is big. It's very big. And the last father conference I had was last November. And I had a guess, because one thing that fathers go through is if you're a father and you struggle with porn, you've struggled with, issues, alcoholism or other kind of things that have derailed you from being the dad you want to be. It's easy to then feel my children would be better off without me and to check out.
Right.
And so I invited the daughter of Rodney King to come to the last father conference. And she wasn't like a speaker or anything, but I asked her to get up and share. And the reason was Rodney King had issues. This was a man who had serious drug issues. He had massive demons that he was dealing with. But this guy was an incredible dad. He was there for his daughter. He went to every school event. He took care of her friends. Like when they didn't have notebooks and stuff, he would buy them. You know, our image of Rodney King is police brutality, riots, drug abuse. No sense of the humanity of this person. And I was so moved to tears by her, like just how much she loved him, and her activities now working in the African American community to keep fathers engaged with their kids comes from her, the satisfaction of her soul by having this father who loved her. And yeah, he had his demons, but he stayed there for her. And I wanted that message to get to men, that we so often feel like, I'm too bad, I should just leave. And no, you should get better. you should stay connected, do the best you can. But so the Father Conference is a really powerful event, and I really hope that continues to grow each year.
And the Father Conference,
on that side,
and the Father Conferences, do you have a vision for, or are you working with people who are also targeting the young, even the young men who are not fathers, or but who become the fathers?
Yeah, our messaging was for fathers to be fathers, derailed fathers, and father figures. So we really want the kind of the mentorship, and also grandparents. I had a workshop just for grandfathers, because they're so often becoming the male predominant figure in a child's life. Right. And mentors. Donald Parrish, who's a pastor in Dallas, he came out to both conferences that I had. He organized a father-son breakfast in one of the poorest communities in Dallas. And he realized that a bunch of these kids didn't have dads. Their dads were in prison or gone or whatever. So he sent out a call for mentors, and he expected 30 or 40 men to show up. He had 600 men show up to be mentors.
Did he have enough breakfast? Sorry. Sorry.
Yes, he did. But it's like there are men out there who have the capacity. They just don't know what to do. And so I think we really need mentors. We really need men who can step up and start to occupy positions for kids. We need foster families. We need that, because foster care produces it's a system that produces a vulnerability that traffickers just wait. It's easy pickings on foster kids, and they know it, and they go after them. Something like 70% of the kids who are arrested for prostitution in the state of California are in the foster care system or came out of the foster care system. So that's another thing that we have to deal with.
Scary. Yeah.
You've got the capacity of heart and character. There are kids who really desperately need that. And so that's one of my messages to men.
Yeah. So, one of the ways you are bringing the message of all of this work to people in LA, and now because you've been forced to go online, I believe that as much as there is a lot of pain associated with that, it's probably getting you to a whole new level of engagement and capacity to outreach to people in America and beyond America. But tell us a little bit about what you're doing. This See It, End It, your music and arts festival that's dealing with this challenging topic.
Well, so that's the second side of things. So my first focus is related to fathers. The second is culture, because you can grow up in a really good family and you're still living in this culture that's just hypersexualized and really normalizing kind of this is a reality, right? So I got this idea about 3 years ago to have a film and art festival where we'd have actually, I got so slammed. People were coming out and saying, you can't call this a festival. This is ugly. This is dark. No, you can't call it a festival. I said, no, I really wanted this to be a celebration. So as much as it's exposing people to things that are dark, it's a celebration of when we come together, we can end it. And we really need that. We need the link, the hope with the reality, because if it's just the darkness, that's overwhelming and a lot of people can't handle it. But if it's really clearly connected with the hope that we can use this 21st century, for God's sake, we should not be having 12-year-olds sold for sex or 2-year-olds, or I mean, it's just So in putting this together was really how do we engage with the film and art world? And there are people that are making films, but they have very little viewership. So how do we create a platform for people to be able to come and see a story come to life through film, which has the ability to really impact our hearts and all of the arts, like stage performances, spoken word, music, dance. So we wanted to have a platform to be able to bring people together around the issue, but to leave with the tremendous amount of hope and clear steps. This is what I can do. This is how
right, because that's the key thing there is to be, in a sense, burdened with the dark reality of what's going on, but not being able to walk away with, yes, I can do this. I can see that whatever effort that I make is going to make a difference in a person's life. They're the key things. Otherwise, it's just, I don't want to hear this. I'm already sad enough. I've got enough to burn. I just feel heavy.
One more thing.
Sorry. I mean, I feel this way many times. I deal with a lot of these issues and, wide swath of these issues. Even I'm working on a summit with a working group in the organization that I work with at the UN on COVID and domestic violence. Because, sheltering in place with the very people who are, and I'm sure there are many elements of this abuse and effectively trafficking of, and sex trafficking, one way or another, is being shaped anew by COVID and all of the challenges that are going on. So tell us a little bit.
The grooming is happening on a massive scale now with all these kids sitting at computers. You have the active grooming of children for future exploitation is happening on a massive scale right now. So that it is very alarming.
Okay, back to your festival. Let's try to get, there's so many topics, so many side roads we can take, and I will just have to bring you back to speak about this again as we're closer to the festival, because I think that can be useful for all of us. But tell us a little bit more about the festival. Who comes? What do you do? How is it going to be different this year than last year? There's a few questions.
Huge difference. If you do go to our website, so seeitended.com, we have a video that is like, you can see kind of what we did last year with a physical event.
Right.
But this has got everything is just changed. And so what we did, we partner now with Emerge Studios out of Canada, and we're creating a whole platform. So now we're going to create a platform that will be able to then, digitally have the film and art festival. So you'll watch films, you'll hear speakers talk about the films, not just the filmmakers, but experts in the field. So the way we pick the films is for the content, because this has a message we want people to get. So foster care, we want them to understand the vulnerabilities and the opportunities that are there. These kind of job offers, modeling jobs. There's all different things that are being used and that bring up issues that can be discussed. So we have experts, we have survivors, we have law enforcement, legislators. So there's exposure to all the nuance and the depths of this issue that come with the films or a block of films. And then we have music, we have musicians that have taken on this issue. We have dance performances. So all of that now will go digital. So we'll have a very dynamic, we're looking at now a 6 day event.
Wow, yeah, it's grown since I heard about it.
I know it's grown since I thought about it. But it's really exciting because it goes beyond, just having a more localized event. So it's local, but it's expanding. So we want every organization. So any UN departments that are working with human trafficking can have their own page on this platform. So that more eyes will go on things that are being done and things that need to be done. So if your issue is the exploitation of boys in fishing in Thailand, we can have we'll have a labor trafficking section. You can go there and find out what's happening locally and internationally, and then connect organizations. So that if you want to donate, you can donate to this organization working in Cambodia or in downtown Los Angeles. So the intention is to create this community of people engaged. Yeah.
So right there, I just want to give a quick. I put a QR code right on the screen, and anybody, that will just take you straight to the Exceptional TV page that has Patrick and all of his information on it. So I encourage people to go to that and just to send an email to Patrick, because that way he'll get you on his lists, and then you can get involved. And as your platform gets more, comes a little bit further along and we get closer to the day, there will be information on that page. We just want to be able to funnel that through to you. But for right now, this is one place where they can get hold of you. So just use the QR code there, or the Exceptional TV website, and do a search for Patrick Erlandson. Yep, human trafficking, joyful topic. Okay, back to what you're doing. So this platform. Sorry, who's putting together this platform for you? And
Emerge Studios. We're partnering with Emerge Studios. So they've worked with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. They worked with a number of different organizations. They've done a lot with virtual reality to engage people empathetically with different issues.
Right.
And working with the corporate world. So what we really want is to get corporations to want to be identified with making the world a better place. And there's a lot of people now in Generation Z and millennials that they're going to choose where to shop based on if this company's doing something that needs to be done. And we need more of that. We need to use our shopping. We need to use our, all the different ways we interact with the world in a way that's ensuring the safety and security of people. And so we can do that through this.
And I think there are even Europe, if you're doing business, if you're a large corporation, you do over a certain amount of business with companies in Europe, you have to put out an annual human trafficking statement, and you have to show that you are against it, that you are not, none of your money is filtering down and going into any parts of that. So there are gradually, hopefully, ways to marginalize a lot of this even more and more through the average person, through our policy making. Yeah, there's
California has that legislation. So if you make over a certain amount of money, you have to guarantee that your supply chain doesn't have any human trafficking or enslavement. Yeah.
Right.
So there are ways. We need the cooperation of legislation, law enforcement.
Yeah.
But like they said, I mean, when they break it down, it's about 7% of the effort to end human trafficking comes from law enforcement, and 93% comes from the public. How we behave, what we do, is where the greatest change is going to come. So our event this year is going to be. We're looking at two dates, so either mid-November or the first week of December. So that's what we're looking at now. So stay tuned. But it will be this year that we're going to launch. And it's going to be really inspiring. I mean, our thing is really to not just hit you over the head with the threat of this issue, but to really inspire people with the hope. Really, when we come together, there's no reason why we should have 40 million people, up to 40 million people being enslaved today.
It's just very simple. We're better together. So that's, a plug. I would say anybody who's watching on Exceptional TV, even if you just sign up for the get on our mailing list, we will absolutely be letting you know what's going on with Patrick and the See It End It Arts Festival coming up in November or December. As we close out, I mean, the hour has gone so fast. I thank you so much for your time, Patrick, but not just for your time now, but for your daily effort of heart and turning that into steps and actions and difference in people's lives. Thank you so much. So, and I can't thank you enough for that, and for the lives, one life, 10 lives, that has made a difference. We all know how complex living life can be just in our own life, but to see what is being done to so many people it's criminal and horrendous, and to know that we can make a difference. So your final couple of 3 things that you would say to people. What would you say to men? What would you say to women? And what do you want anybody who's listening now to do right now?
Sorry, I put you on the spot. It's great. men really don't back away from this. And I think for too long, this has been like a woman's issue. And so we really need men to kind of step up because men are the problem. The demand side comes from men. Men are the solution as well. Yeah. So when we turn it around, you're the solution. Men are the solution to this. Everyone needs to be aware of it because it just takes, looking at something, recognizing, if you recognize what it is, you can affect change. I mean, we've had people rescued from international human trafficking rings just because someone said that doesn't look right, and they called the hotline. Put the hotline number in your phone. I mean, there's 877. Oh God, I'm going to say it wrong.
Well, say it right. I'll make sure that the hotline is put on your page. So again, if people just go straight to it. If people could
put this, yeah, please do. So it's 888-3737-888. 888-3737-888. But people should have that in their phone. Put that in your smartphone. If you see something, you can send a message anonymously. You can call and just say, "Look, this doesn't look right."
Yep.
That goes to the national hotline, and they contact local law enforcement that understands human trafficking.
I mean,
those kind of things.
Right there. That is a very specific. Everybody, put that number right in your phone. Make it a hotline, and when you do see something, do something.
Yeah.
Just do something. Fantastic. And do you have anything for the women out there? You spoke to the men. You gave everybody something to do. Do you have anything in particular to the women? I mean, I just want to be fair and even here.
Well, women are more and more getting led down this path, and that there's kind of this movement of kind of empowering women by accepting kind of the whole sex industry, which I think is very alarming. And so I hope more and more women will stand up and say, like, this is not empowering. This is not the empowerment that we want. And there's a real split within the feminist movement.
Right.
You have the feminists who are saying, stripping and being a prostitute and all this kind of thing should be your right. And then there's the other side, it's just like it all feeds exploitation.
Right.
And I hope that more women will start to really look at this issue as not empowering to women, but is really threatening to daughters and to sons.
And even engaging in the conversation, just to begin to see that it's not as, that it's an important conversation to have, and to figure out how to speak to our peers and our young girls from the mother's side, because I happen to believe that raising a family where at all possible, and it's not always possible, but the mother can do things that many times the father can't do, and absolutely there are things that the messages that come from the father that moms moms can't say anything about too. So it's a challenge to raise families in the best of circumstances, let alone when life is tough and things are not as optimal.
Also, I would add one thing too, is it's like you're involved in different organizations and with schools. Make sure California has a law that they should be teaching about human trafficking in the schools. It should be part of the curriculum, but it's not mandated in a sense that they have to do it. There's no repercussion if the school doesn't. So if they go and request that something be done about educating kids in their schools.
Yeah.
And to realize too that now elementary school kids are being targeted. It's not middle school and high schools. There are recruiters there on campus that are looking for kids. So raise it with the PTA. Raise this issue with other organizations. In your church or your synagogue or temple. Have a speaker come and speak. These are all things that people can do. To kind of bring more attention to it within their own network, within their own family and community.
Yeah, because as you say, and awareness of the issue. I mean, sometimes if you don't have that awareness, when you see something, you don't recognize it. It's like it may as well not be right in front of you. But when you understand how prevalent it is, how widespread it is, and what's going on, you can think again, and you can check. You check with your kids. Well, who are you speaking with? Ask even your children questions. Find out who they're talking with. That's not always simple and easy, but the parents can make a difference in their children's lives, even when it's difficult. So, well, Patrick, I just want to thank you so very much for everything that you're doing, for taking the time to be here this morning. It still is this morning here in California. And I look forward to having you back again, and we'll hear more about where things are going, how the platform is developing, get some more tips and tricks about what it is that people can do, because even just those small little things, having the hotline, and the idea of getting even the kids aware, not just from the parents, but from inside their school, because parents can teach, mom, dad, whatever it is, can teach their kids so much, but it really is helpful to have that third party perspective being introduced to children at school.
Peer is powerful.
Yeah.
And if we have, I've spoken to a number of different high schools where they have human trafficking clubs, and they're really powerful because they see what's happening, and they can speak to their peers. That's a really, really important step.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much,
We
Patrick.
can keep going.
Well, I'm going to circle back around and grab you again. That's what I'm going to do. So
Please do.
So it's been, dare I say, fun. At times thinking about what's going on, very sickening. Every time I do think about it, it doesn't get any better, and I'm sure it does not for you nor any of the people who are dealing with it. And yet there are the lives just really require us to at least be aware and to be prepared to pick up our phones and make a call, and to bring this awareness to our own families. So thank you so much for being there. And we will make sure that we get your word out as many places as we can. And I've got some ideas where we can help get that going a little bit more in the UN environment as well. So thank you so much.
I love what you're doing.
Yeah. And so come back again. Anybody who's here, please come back and join us next week for Exceptional TV, because we have the most exceptional people on this show. As you will have heard from from Patrick's mouth today, you can tell he is not your average person, and he is making good trouble by making this type of a topic. And I take that from John Lewis, and that's a whole other little personal story of mine. But people making good trouble, it's really, really important. So make this festival really rock, Patrick. Thank you so much for being with us, and I look forward to seeing everybody same time next week.